conversation, critical thinking, fear exposure. One of the things I mentioned in Julie Behling's podcast is I was like, all right, I'm really terrified of Nazis. I really have to understand Nazis. So I started reading the hardcore Nazi stuff, not stuff about Nazis written by someone who's thinking critically or whatever. I'm like straight from the source. What are the Nazis saying on their websites? What are they saying in their books? What does the Jewish Peril say? What does the Turner Diary say? What do all these things say? And in that, it's not to say that it's not scary or horrifying. It's atrocious. It's worse than you think. But you start to realize that that's not really what's happening around you. That's not what's really happening in your communities. And at least the more that I understand things, the less fearful that I feel of them, the less I want to go to war with them. And that might be family dynamics, that might be politics, it could be literally anything. You need to jump into the water of the things that you're scared of doing.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, my guest is Ty King. With him because he is a young man who is formerly a member of Antifa. And the fact that people are coming out gives me a lot of hope. So I wanted to collect his story and hopefully spread the word that there's hope for our young people. So welcome, Ty.
Hi, thank you for having me, Carrie. It's nice to be here.
So I just want to hear your story from the beginning, as if I didn't hear it before.
Yeah, totally. So, I guess from the beginning, the way I described it on Julie's podcast, I was born in 1997, and I come from a Christian conservative background and a family that always loved paying attention to politics. My grandfather was a pastor at the First Baptist Church down in Odessa, Texas, and did fundraisers with people like Rick Perry and stuff like that. So very, very conservative. Um, and growing up, I'd spent the weekends with my grandparents, and I'd be sitting there watching Fox News every Saturday. What's going on in the Middle East, what's going on with politics in the United States, and kind of watching the crazy from a really young age. And don't want to call my grandparents hateful people by any means, but they're an older generation sitting there, and we're like having these different views. And the older I got, the more I kept an eye on things and the people around me, being like, there's a lot of Muslim hate, there's a lot of gay hate, there's a lot of hatred of different minorities that I could see coming from my own side of the equation. And I guess getting older, mixing that in and not quite understanding where the older generations were coming from, mixed in with the fact that we had presidents like Bush or Obama or Trump who it just felt like every single time somebody was coming in, something was happening, something beyond criminal, something warmongering, people were dying, and people just I felt like a lot of people were just kind of following in line with that. So I guess about the time Donald Trump got elected, there was this mass majority of people that were like, okay, we're pissed off, screw this guy, we're going after the president of the United States. And without taking time to research and fully understand what it meant for him to be an outside candidate, never taking the time to speak with my own family members or people in my life about why they would actually support somebody like this, it straight up became a campaign of let's get the president of the United States of America. And whenever I moved to Eugene, Oregon, where I was living at the time, there was a really, really good ground for that, falling into that sort of spiritual trap, as I call it, and causing a lot of destruction. Where now Oregon is not a safe place. It is not a fun place. It is not a place like it used to be. It's not magical. People aren't open. It's not fostering anything good. We have politicians that like to pretend that they're helping us, but at the end of the day, this place gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and Antifa had a large part to play in that.
So if I can go all the way back to, you said that you grew up in this household that was very conservative, very Christian conservative, and you said you had different views. Where did your different views come from and at what age?
I don't know. Like I remember one of my earliest disagreements was, largely with the Muslim thing, which back then it was coming from the Christian side, where it's just like, we don't like the Muslims. We need to go spread democracy. They're all terrorists. They're all this. They're all that. And watching things like the Patriot Act be put forward, I don't, like I said, I was a really young kid when I started to see this, so I don't know if the idea was planted in my head, but I just remember from a really young age being like, what makes you think they can't turn this around and use it on Christians? And like the older you're getting, you're like, this war isn't slowing down. Now it's multiple wars. Now we're all over the place. Now we're in over 70 nations all across the globe. This is starting to look more like imperialism. And I guess views on that, to where maybe the older I got, the more I just wanted to be rebellious. Maybe there was just more of the negativity that was there that I was actively seeking, and not really realizing that America was stolen from us a long time ago, before 1997, before I was born. Politicians came in, they killed JFK, and they took over things. So it's like, I'm having to go and understand this America that now that I've never even lived in. I
What
think I
does
got a
that
little
mean?
sidetracked there.
An America you've never even lived in?
It feels like my entire life in this country has just been a facade. It's just the two-party system, everybody left and right and left and right. No one really wanted to take the time to hear one another out. Politicians saying one thing and doing another. Everything just feels like we're all just a part of this Truman Show where we really have no control over what's happening. And it's like I have this nostalgic feeling for a time I've never been a part of where people just could trust their president, could trust their systems, could trust their politicians. There was a my grandfather being a pastor. I'll have to find this article. Maybe I'll post it on my channel. But he got written about in a newspaper at one point, and one thing he wrote was, I think it was, "I love fried chicken chasing skirt in my government." And
Okay.
back in like the 1950s or 60s or something like that. And I'm like, damn, I had a grandfather that really trusted in his country, really believed in what was happening, believed in the military, believed in his leaders. I don't have that anymore. Anytime I've tried to put faith into any leader like Bernie Sanders, you just ultimately wind up completely disappointed by a lack of action. They want to go up and they want to put their fists in the air and scream revolution, but when push comes to shove, they're no different. AOC, the squad, they're just all pretenders following the Bernie model. And it's like, we want real change, not this bullshit that we're being fed. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your
You're
channel.
totally fine. But I'm wondering what you mean by real change. Like what is an ideal society, or what did you think that an ideal society was when you were part of Antifa versus what you think an ideal society is today, or has it not changed?
I'd say it's definitely changed. In Antifa, it was more utopian thinking. It was more of the future is within our grasp. We can change things in our lifetime. Technologies have come so far, understanding has come so far, but you idiots need to get it together. You people on the right need to get your crap together and you need to get on board. And as soon as we can educate you, well, then the planet can change and we can get things running again. That's obviously very askew. That's very tribal. It's not nuanced at all. My vision now is just, people just in my life think I'm just completely obsessed with podcasts, and they're completely right. But that's my version of America, being able to sit down and watch people on a panel have a real, tangible discussion for hours on end and come to actual solutions. Things like you're doing, the Radical Center, Benjamin Boyce, Julie Billing, like all the way up to Joe Rogan, and watching the same government that's been screwing us the entire time come down so hard. It's like, oh yeah, this is more revolutionary than grabbing an AR-15 and storming the Capitol or doing whatever. This is where the real change could be seen. We don't need to go burn down these buildings. We just need to run our mouths like there's no tomorrow. And when they tell us it's illegal for us to run our mouths, we keep running them. Julie pointed out on her Twitter. I don't have Twitter, but I was Googling just to see, where things were going with my talks. And she mentioned that YouTube was gaming the stats and that the views weren't going up. And that was something I've noticed. And even on my channel, I have 17 subscribers, not that many views. I'm watching my views go from 80 to 60, from 70 to 50. So now that I'm seeing it with my own eyes, I'm like, holy crap, they do not like this. But you
Oh
know what? It's
no.
kind of fun to watch them try. It's kind of exciting. So it's like more people need to join in on this and run their mouths, because that's the America we need. We need the loudmouth, I don't give a shit America. Like really and truly.
Yeah, and I try to be more diplomatic about it, but absolutely, as a minority who is just like, yeah, we're not your victim. Who knows what's going to be left? But I want people to be able to find truth in a world that seems like it's hiding it from them. So I want to ask you, did school form any of your ideas?
Uh, I wouldn't say politically. We never really had politics in my school up until I got into college. I want to say I went in 2015, which was, I believe, the same year that gay marriage was legalized. So
Okay.
that was popping off about that time when I went to college down in Waco, and that's the first time I was introduced to concepts like non-binaryism and genderqueer and all this stuff. But as far as it forming my opinions on how the world operates, absolutely. Because, the schools made sure I was medicated at a young age. My mother, she started as a substitute teacher and then she became a teacher. So she worked in elementary schools, high schools. She worked with a lot of the special needs kids. So school was very personal in that aspect too, to where I saw a lot of behind the scenes through my mother and her work.
Mhm.
But so definitely it shifted my worldview, but not in any way that I would say is, propaganda.
Okay. So how did it shift your worldview? Like, the reason that I'm wondering is because you're growing up in a Christian home. Your family is teaching you their values for good or for bad. They're teaching you your values. Then you're going to school and you're hearing, is it something, is it different? Was it subtle? Did you hear any of the kind of families bad, schools good rhetoric when you were in school?
Not really. Like I said, I grew up in Odessa, Texas, so it was fairly conservative oil field city, and
Okay.
there just was no, at least not to me. Um, I guess we occasionally had teachers who would come in who were more liberal, but they never pushed it on us at all, which is nice. I feel like I got like the last tail end of that before things really started taking off.
Yeah. And I feel like that's the ideal place for teachers. You don't need to know. As an educator, I always think that you need to focus on the kids, not yourself.
Yeah, they treat kids like their therapy tool, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you how did you find Antifa? Like, because you were physically involved with Antifa, correct?
Yes. Essentially went out seeking it out myself. I met people that were part of the group and who were friends with people within the group. And once Black Lives Matter took off, it was easy to go to the protest and find the people for yourselves. It really was just a matter of donning on the right attire, coming in with a flag, coming in showing that you're serious and ready for action and having the right conversations. And they'll be like, all right, go over there, do this. This is what we're doing now. Keep an eye on things. And boom, you're integrated.
So what does that mean? Like being prepared to do the right.
Doing the right thing on a personal level. So I think this is a major fault of Antifa is exactly what you asked. What is the right thing? To me, the right thing is different than what the right thing to someone else is or to the next person. You think that people are coming out for Black Lives Matter and we're going to focus on the police and all this, but really everybody comes in with their own issues. So there's really no consensus beforehand on what the right thing is other than conservatives bad, we're good. If you see something that scares you, alert us immediately.
And
So
if
for
you're
me
already
that would
taught that, I mean, you literally see somebody wearing an American flag shirt and that could scare you.
yeah, and the trucks coming in and the MAGA flags and then of course you have people when you're calling people Nazis and they're not Nazis, eventually people are going to start doing the salute like satirically to piss you off. A lot of that would start because they're like, "Okay, yeah, Heil Hitler," and they'll do that.
Right.
And then all of a sudden 20 people and everybody around them gets painted as a Nazi. So it's just chaos in terms of what people are trying to find and point out. And that's how a lot of the brawls start. That's how a lot of the violence starts.
How about their ages? What ages are the people who are part of Antifa?
In the beginning, there was a slightly older crowd. As far as like protesters and activists, older,
Right.
I'd say as far as Antifa itself, 40, maybe 50 would be the oldest that it got, but over time, I feel like it got younger and younger and younger. And I've had people make the argument to me that Antifa isn't what it used to be. So maybe it's just like everything else where the younger generation came in and just made it worse off than it already was. A lot of these kids seem to idealize what was happening and they want to go play vigilante too. So you'd see a lot more of that integration coming. And I think a lot of the older people who had been around for a little bit longer tapped out and were like, look, this is bullshit. This isn't what we thought it was. We're just gonna go, yeah, a lot of it now is youth.
Was there any kind of training?
They would coach you on things to say as far as like physical military training, not that I've ever seen, but I have seen videos and I have heard people talking about going to like different centers in Portland and just learning like, self-defense techniques, which probably also involves how to beat somebody up with a bat and tase them. They like to fluff it up and make it sound
Mhm.
like it's non-violent, but if you're going somewhere to train, you're probably expecting violence. And one thing I mentioned in Julie Behling too is there was a lot of younger veterans that were out there who always seemed a little bit more put together than the other crowds, and those are the ones that I would always look at coming in, and there'd be instances where I aspired, I wanted to be like that because I'm like, damn, they're so well put together, and look at them, they're really gonna make the change. And then over time, seeing how they behave, you're like, oh, these people are scary as shit. Like these are thugs, and it's nothing to aspire to.
Have you seen, just talking about the military, have you seen how the army just took away for God, country, and honor, and they replaced it with military army values?
Is that official?
Yes.
Really? Jesus Christ. No, that missed my radar. We are so screwed.
I mean, what do you think our army values are? Because everything that you just said is exactly how I felt about it when I saw it. Like my eyes just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was like,
I don't know, the whole taking of God out of everything, it's like, look, it's not necessarily a Christian thing. It's to say that you are gifted unalienable rights by a being that is not man. Man cannot come and take your rights away. That's all it means. You don't have to be a Christian to believe in that concept. Like, it's just a barrier between you and someone coming after you. To take that out of the military, it just kind of says it all. Like, yeah, your God can't protect you now. That's kind of what it feels like.
and this was just the army, to be clear. To be clear, I
Mm,
don't know that they went with the
okay.
Air Force, Navy, things like that. I think for now it's
Okay.
just the army. I believe it's West Point itself.
Oh,
So
okay. That's not great either.
no,
Jesus.
it's young people. The fact that they say that army values, they can change all the time. We have some pretty crazy stuff going on with the military. And what I mean by crazy stuff is the greatest generation. They would they would give up anything for their country, for loyalty, hope. And it seems to me that I'm just trying to figure out why anyone would join something that is so destructive, something that is ready to just dismantle all of Western civilization and what they think is on the other side of that.
I think it's because they see the military as doing exactly what you just said, destroying the West, burning everything down, going and spreading terror. These wars in the Middle East and a lot of this military action has not made my generation comfortable. It scares the shit out of us. And I mean, you wonder why so many people are killing themselves. They're scared a nuke's going to drop on them tomorrow, or that someone's going to come into their country on parachutes and rape them and murder them. And then the other half that don't think that are supporting it. So it's like we're not put in a helpful place when our entire life, every time I turn on the news or YouTube, it's a snuff film. It's someone getting their head blown off. I have watched thousands of people die. Who could have said that back in the 1990s unless you've been in the military? On the computer screen with my eyes, watching war footage since the time I've been a little kid, I have watched thousands of people get slaughtered. That's not healthy. And that's my entire generation. And I think that when it comes to Antifa, a lot of those people, they're like, you know what? If we can just get the power, if we can get the people behind us, if we can get the people with the guns to support us, if we can get the politicians to take control of all of these things, we can stop it and create this brand new utopia, which, of course, historically speaking, looking at communism, it's never a utopia. It's always just a hellscape. But there's never really been much education. Like, even with my mom being a history teacher, she had books on the shelf of like history throughout the ages. And even having the communist books there, I was always more interested in the fascism and the Nazi books. And the schools also kind of help facilitate that. We never take the time to learn about communism. We only ever learn about Nazism. And
Right.
that's a huge problem because if we understood communism the same way we understood fascism, most people would not have hopped onto this at all. The same way most people don't hop onto white supremacy. They really don't. The numbers are very small.
Okay, I've got a few things on that one. Okay. So the first thing is that is your generation controlled by fear?
100%. 100%. I mean, you see it in terms of anxiety, you see it in the way we speak. A lot of the activists, they can't go out like the W Path files. I don't remember if it was like Sky News or something. They asked like 33 different people from W Path to come forward. None of them came forward to make a statement, but they had one activist come on and he spent like 10 or 15 minutes talking about his autism and his trauma and his struggle and his this and his that and his fear for the future and his fear for the current moment, saying nothing substantive the entire time. And it's just fear, 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 fear. I'm scared of this. I'm scared of you. I'm scared of that. And my entire generation operates in that way. It's why we can't say anything to each other. Oh, you say something that's a little off color. People look around and look over their shoulders. And it's like, no, lock eyes. We're having a conversation. It's fine. No one's going to get upset. Like, relax. But my generation is losing its ability to do that and think critically.
And How did that happen? Do you think that it was
I,
well, because with Antifa, from what I saw from Antifa, you guys were not locked down because they would say, like, our politicians would say their social justice initiatives are too important to lock them in their homes. I saw a lot of
mhm.
people who I think really joined Antifa because it was a way to get out of the social lockdown. Right? Quite frankly, a lot of young men went because there were like orgies and other stuff happening at the things afterwards. Like that was
It's a
their reason
very
for going.
sexual environment, like, and very party based too. That's a very important point. Like, most of these people, I'm someone who I could sit here and talk politics 24/7.
Yeah,
As much as that may annoy the people around me sometimes, like, I put the work in. I want to understand the world around me.
right.
These people will get pissed off if you start talking to them outside the process. Like, we're trying to do cocaine, we're trying to do ketamine, we're trying to drink, we're trying to play this video game, we're trying to do this. They really don't give a crap about this at the end of the day. There was a whistleblower on Redacted who came out who talked about all the kids disappearing at the border, and he said the same thing. He's like, they would just drop these kids off in the middle of the night, and they were more interested in going bar hopping afterwards. They didn't care about what they were doing. They just want to feel good, go do drugs, get that endorphin rush, feel good again, wake up feeling shitty, keep it going, and it just becomes a cycle and a loop.
Did it change with COVID?
Yeah, I think COVID brought a lot more people out, and there's a lot of hypocrisy in terms of COVID too, because you had people coming out unmasked or with mask, and I'm not even gonna pretend like I didn't. I 100% did. But when you see the other side wearing no mask, you're just like spitting at them. You're just doing all this vile
Right.
crap. I mean, I wasn't physically spitting, but I saw people physically spitting at these
Yeah.
people. So it wasn't about health. It wasn't about awareness. It was tribalism all the way through.
No, they would say things like, "Save grandma," and then
Hmm.
if a grandma was out at a Back the Blue event, they would yell and scream and spit and shove grandma.
And And half these people don't even talk to their grandmothers because their grandmothers are conservative. So they disown them because they're Nazis. So they don't even talk to the old people anymore. How do I know? Because I love talking with old people and they all tell me the same thing. They're like, people don't talk with us from your generation like you do. I don't talk to my grandkids the same way I do to you. And that breaks my heart every single time. I have a neighbor over here. I don't agree with every single thing she says, but I love talking with her. She teaches me a lot. The same way teaching with my talking with my own grandmother teaches me a lot. And it turns out, historically speaking, they were both on two very different sides of the aisles, marching for very different things. So that's a lot of perspective I can stand to gain just simply by talking with my elders. But we don't care about our elders unless they're political pawns.
I'm interested that you said political pawns because when I see the people who are benefiting, it's 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 interesting to me that young people don't know what fascism actually is. So, when government merges with business to control what's happening,
Hmm.
you get fascism, right?
Yeah,
So,
like a hypothetical example where, say that there's a presidential election and one of the candidates gets in bed with the feds and Twitter and has a very convenient story about him wiped off right before the Georgia elections, which would have really changed the results of everything happening. If something like that happened, yeah, that would be constituted as fascism, I think.
yeah, but also I think in terms of bringing politics into the classroom, making
100%.
sure that our kids know one point of view and only one point of view, only hearing. I have so many books, from curriculum books to books about art, but they will say things like prepare for your cultural revolution for a middle school book on art.
Maoism.
And we don't know. And that's why I think that our young people are being used. My argument is that they're being used, I think, in the same way that African Americans before the 1930s, they were intact families. They believed in education. All things were upwardly mobile, but somebody taught them to resent. Somebody taught them that resentment was more powerful than hope. Resentment was more powerful or more useful than going out and doing for yourself. And now I see that happening with our young people. You ask kids today, what are your dreams? What are your ambitions? What are your goals? And most of the time it's, I don't know. And it's not the same as our I don't knows when I was your age. You know, ours were, I don't know right now, leave me alone. I'm a kid. I don't want to talk to adults. Right? Yours are like, you really don't know. Like, where is the hope?
Yeah, it's so sad. And talking to a lot of these kids too, it's like you hate to say it, but half of them just seem brain dead. They're just so slow. The vocabulary skills aren't there. COVID didn't help that. And my mom would never shit talk any of her kids ever. She loves every single one of her kids she ever taught. She's had problems with a few to be sure, and those are fun to talk about. But for the most part, talk with my mom over the course of COVID, it just gets worse and worse. And she's seen it. She's like, these kids, they haven't got help at school, they haven't got help at home, and they're very slow. They're very easy to manipulate. They're very you could just see it, and you don't want to sound mean and say that about a kid, but my generation was at least I looked at a sixth grader when I was a kid, and I could feel like that was an adult. There was just something about the way that the older kids used to carry themselves that you couldn't distinguish a sixth grader from a high schooler.
Yeah.
Now I can't distinguish a 20-year-old from a 40-year-old. That's a
Yeah.
problem. Like, the kids are just broken.
I feel like you can't a 25-year-old from a 6-year-old, honestly. Sometimes I will talk to people and they will physically walk backwards if they don't agree. And
I get that a lot too.
and it's just what is going on? One of the things that I saw with Antifa was that they would march in lockstep. They would come to one of our events, like a Back the Blue or something like that, right? And they would come to our events in lockstep, like do the whole pigeon toed turn and talk to you the exact same way. And you just thought, do you not know what the Nazi brown shirts are?
And that's one realization I came to about 2022 was precisely that, was just literal brown shirts. Like, you are reporting on people, you are getting upset with people, you are so essentially when you get there and you're told, like, if you see anything, go to these certain parties, go to these certain people, this is how you're going to communicate, this is how you're going to operate. So I might have just seen some redneck walking down with the Confederate flag, and I'll go over there and be like, hey, you need to check him out. They put something into the walkie, a couple guys from the crowd in Antifa over there go and they start following him. Maybe they get physical, maybe they have an interaction with him, maybe they don't. And you see people doing that constantly, constantly. And it's like I told Julie, it's like, who knows if I was even talking to a Fed or a cop? Like, that's one thing we know now is a big problem with January 6th is, like, a lot of the Black Lives Matter rights and protesters, there were undercovers there who January 6th would not have gone down the way it did had there not been instigators. And to know that a lot of these people may have just been going around talking to them willy-nilly, like giving them information on their neighbors, on potential business owners, people in your community, people who, like, after the protests, mind you, Eugene's big, but like I still see people walking around from the protests that I'm like, oh, you were the guy with the shotgun, or oh, you were the guy with the AR-15. Like, these people don't just go away; they live here. So
Right.
it's like you have to live with that.
Right.
No, it's just
What makes people willing to turn on their neighbors?
fear. Just the fear of we can't talk anymore, the fear of not being heard, the fear of homophobia or racism, that everyone who voted for Trump wants this one particular future. Just like you want your utopia, well, everyone must have utopian thinking. They must want a MAGA utopia. What does that look like? It looks like 1940s National Socialism. It looks like Jim Crow. It looks like this. It looks like that. And meanwhile, the past 4 years, the Biden, well, three going on 4 years of the Biden administration I've been watching, every single thing that we were scared that Trump was doing, that's since been disproven for the most part, Biden's been doing it in full force. And where's Antifa been? I mean, the head fascist in chief right now. We've gone back to the point where the presidents are warmongers and criminals again, but they use Donald Trump as a deflection point to where
Yeah.
now we don't look at the Bushes and the Obamas. Now we don't look at the Bidens. Now we look at the Trumps. Now we look at the potential Trumps. And that was a powerful tool because, like I said in the beginning, my generation just wanted accountability. Why did you guys knock down the towers? Why did you go steal oil from the Middle East? Why were you authorizing drone strikes on children? Now we're not going to get those answers because everyone's always Trump, 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 Trump. And meanwhile, we have Joe Biden, who literally signed off on drone strikes during the Obama administration with the man himself, scot clean. But don't worry, he's mentally unstable. So if he does need to be caught for anything, we won't hold him accountable. It just makes no sense.
It seems like you guys are pawns. What I saw, and maybe I'm wrong about this, please correct me if I am. I have no problem with people disagreeing with me. But what I saw was Barack Obama broke people's brains. It gave them permission to say, we aren't racist. We are the most wonderful, loving people in the world because look what we did. And meanwhile, a
Yeah.
bunch of shady stuff was happening that somebody got a free pass simply for being my skin tone.
Yeah, I feel it too. And with Barack Obama, it's a weird. I think that's where a lot of cognitive dissonance started for me because before gay marriage was legalized, I was on about the drone strikes, I was on about the war, I was on the fuck Obama bandwagon.
Okay.
The day gay marriage happened, that for some reason just went away from my head for like a year or two where I didn't really think about that. I was more at that point I was like starting fights with my family over being gay and like having those types of arguments. I didn't really think that much of the war crimes for a minute after that. And thinking back on that time for that to just kind of flash out like that, it's weird, especially looking back. He was holding out on gay marriage for so long. He only did it when it was politically convenient.
Well, I think that for a lot of people, they don't care until it affects them personally. And then I don't think that anybody coming after Obama stood much of a chance, but especially the fact that it wasn't a woman became the target. So you guys go out there, and I'm just going to be blunt. Sorry, I don't mean to be offensive, but
No,
I lived in Seattle in 2020. I watched the crazy. I actually was jumped by a girl who seriously could have been my daughter. She looked so much like me. But I
jeez.
carried a sign that had Martin Luther King's face on it, and it said, "Character matters, reject CRT. They are using us." They were organized enough that two girls were talking to me, and one of them turns around, must call the other girl. She gets on her phone. And by the time I get back to my car, the girl is waiting for me, glare in her eyes. And she says, "I will not allow you to spread your hate." And I was like, I, I was so shocked. I'm like, my sign isn't hateful. Like, so I didn't understand. I specifically tried to make a peaceful sign. But the reality is that we were being used. We were being used for pawns. We're being pushed into these ideological boxes, and if you don't fit into that box, well, then somebody can punch you in the middle of the street. And when you get up and go and tell their leader, they say, "Well, you shouldn't have been carrying that sign, should you?"
Mhm.
And these are the people who are all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Were you guys taught about diversity, equity, inclusion, or was it just to show up and go battle?
I think most of what my generation understands about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's memes. My entire generation, so many people around me, they seriously learn through memes. And the worst people at the protest, the most politically active, they're the shit posters a lot of the time. So you see 24/7 meme, 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 meme. This is why I had to get off social media. I haven't been on Facebook or Twitter or anything for the last 2 years because
Wow.
it is a drug. Like I put one of those blockers on my phone because I couldn't even delete the app. The first day I blocked it, I tried to instinctually open Facebook, I think like 140, 150 times, knowing that it was blocked. So, like, to know that it has that effect on people and that most of people's information is and they might even see it as a meme, they might, like, be like, "Oh, well, this is just a picture with information that I agree with. This isn't a meme." It's like, "No, that's a meme." And you hear the way they talk too, especially at the protests. That's one thing that would really piss me off is I at least wanted to have a genuine conversation for all the stupid shit I was doing, but I could hear people talking in memes and slogans, and they were pulling things from Facebook and Tumblr, and I'm just like, you can see the literal programming in people's minds. Like a lot of what people believe about communism or anarchy and all of this, it's the internet, it's memes. Like people have to like get rid of their social media. Like we need some sort of mass social media deletion campaign where people just pull the plug and say we're not going to support this anymore because those little machines, those little programs, they get you so worked up and uneducated. It's the same problem with TikTok. You know, I know there's a lot of problems with the TikTok bill, Patriot Act 2.0, yada yada yada, but it doesn't negate from the reality that TikTok is a weapon and it makes our kids dumber and dumber and dumber, and it makes the Chinese kids smarter and smarter and smarter over there.
That's
So it's
true.
like that's a weapon.
That's true. But the other side of that is that authoritarianism is scary.
Yeah,
So while I think it's important that we know this information and that we as parents teach our children, stay away from it. It's a drug. Can really cause you a lot of problems. We also have to have solutions that aren't authoritarian,
hundred
because
percent.
that pendulum swings, right? It goes this side, this is what we want. And then when this side gets control, they say, this is what we want. And then we never get to a place where we can coexist, right?
Absolutely. And as far as that TikTok thing, that's not me making one statement or the other.
Yeah.
I get that that's a real serious problem coming in, and that's a scary thing. It's like abortion. Nobody wanted to talk about late term abortions. Nobody wanted to talk about the medical malpractice that was happening. Nobody wanted to talk about them selling off fetuses. I started a fight with some guy way before the protest. He was showing like dead fetus pictures outside of the Chase Bank, which I still don't think is really the most appropriate when you're across from a bus station. There's kids walking around, but I got physical with him and I got pissed. What I should have done was had a conversation, because looking back, all the things that were on his sign were actually happening. And if people had just been willing to sit down and be like, huh, well, that's pretty horrifying. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, and sit down and be educated? Well, then we wouldn't see things like what's happening in Texas, where now women are just getting straight up bounties put on them for having miscarriages. It's like now you're seeing that go the completely other way. And it's
Right.
like you have to make time for people and their craziness. Like, what would have happened if early on during the trans discussions, when the one guy in the back of the room was being like, well, what if they identify as animals? What then? What if instead of calling him stupid and ignorant and saying that's never going to happen in a million years, someone just sat back and was like, you know what? We're going to equate for that. We're going to do this because we know that other people have your concerns too. That in case people start going off and identifying as animals, this is the measures we will take. Happy? Happy.
Yeah.
Boom. And then when it happens in the future, we can be like, huh, well, at least there's a reference point for that. We don't leave room for the other side to have anything. Like, whoever wins the argument, right or left, that's who has control over the legislation, when really the legislation should be 50-50 in terms of what people want and need in order to have a functional society.
Well, I wonder if we taught critical thinking, and I don't like to use the term critical anymore because it now means to look through things through a lens of misery. But analytical thinking. I wonder if we would have a 50-50 society. I feel like if people knew the truth about things, and I do believe in objective truth in many areas of life, but I feel like if people knew the truth, we wouldn't be a 50-50 society because there are certain things that are just true, like focusing and obsessing on yourself, becoming an utter narcissist, which I see happening. I see that everything being about what can I gain? What pleasure can I have? As opposed to how can I contribute to a society and make things better for multiple people is something that young people seem like they're not being told how to do, even how to do it. Do you think that that's correct? Do you think that there is a push towards being self-obsessed?
Absolutely. And it just makes it so hard to have a conversation, because it's really so many people. It's so hard to make friends. You see, they just want drugs and sex and to talk about all these frivolous things and how they want to burn down society. And it's just like, it's so isolating to know that it's so many people that are on this path, to where it's like something bad happens, they have no problem sitting down and crying about it and posting that on Facebook and getting depressed over it. But it's like, we're not, it's like I said, we're not doing any solutions. We're not having any analytical thinking. People think that you need to only have that in certain spaces, like when you're online or with you're with a certain party. You need to take that with you every aspect of your life, every single place that you go, or at least try to. I know it's an impossible standard, but it's a standard that we can all strive to be better on. And we have to like teach each other and teach ourselves what we weren't taught. But I think that's what's important about people like you, or people like Julie, or said people like Joe Rogan or Buck Angel. Like, I really think that this is where the critical thinking is going to start to come in, because now it's creating a web of people that it's just the new thing. I will sit here and watch a podcast for 24 hours a day, where I used to just watch, Sopranos or Star Wars or something on Disney. Like, now I feel guilty doing that, because it's like I could be listening to someone give me something real. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are trying to follow that, and we need to crank down on the government's authoritarian tactics, because they are trying to suppress people like you. They're trying to suppress people like me. They're trying to suppress anybody with an alternative point of view. And as soon as we can break those systems, and maybe this is the old Antifa talking, but dismantle some of the things that got put back in the last couple of years, like CRT and DEI and all these systems, that it really was the goal to get those implemented in the colleges. If you can strip it out and get it stripped out quickly and wake people up to what's actually happening and tell them, no, this is racist, this is homophobic, this is a very, very dark thing. then it's all going to fall apart. It's like with the detransitioner thing. That's only been going on a few years, but once the gays started getting attention, the gays know how to organize. So now that's falling apart pretty quick, and that can happen in so many different avenues for so many different people.
Okay, two questions, and then we'll wrap up. But the first one
Okay.
is do you consider yourself part of the queer community?
No, no, I'm LGBT. I stop at the T. Anything past that, like, there's some things in there that I believe are real. Asexuality, yeah. Intersex, yeah. That's not my community. I'm LGBT. I'm not gonna slam anyone else for anything else, but the queer
Do you,
shit just isn't real to me.
well, and that's the definition of queer. So the definition of queer is literally to ruin. And so to ruin truth. That doesn't mean that people aren't gay. It doesn't mean that people aren't lesbian. It doesn't mean that people shouldn't be treated well. But when we say that there's nothing like, no, pedophilia, right? So we say that there's nothing wrong at all. And so many of our young people today are saying, even here, I live in Utah, okay? I mean, even here in Utah, our young people will say, well, I'm part of the queer community or whatever. And I feel like it's just something that's fed to them without them really
Hmm.
understanding where it's coming from.
I was say to most of these kids, being queer is just being yourself, dressing colorfully, living out loud, things that sound nice, but it's like you said, it has its origins elsewhere, and it's just a trend. It's just a fad. It's gonna fade out just like metrosexuality, I think, which obviously wasn't a sexuality. It was just a trend, and then it just went away. I think the day is gonna come where the queer crap just it's not gonna be taken seriously, and then maybe it'll come back in some sort of retro whatever, but it's
I
just
think
not
it's
real, it's not sustainable.
I think it's Marxist and it needs to die out before it gains more ground because right now the kids think it's cute and empowering, but becoming a new red guard, like the stuff I sent you about the Sunrise group, becoming a
Yeah,
new red guard is not something that anybody I think wants to live with that guilt afterwards. What is the antidote? How do we begin to heal?
conversation, critical thinking, fear exposure. One of the things I mentioned in Julie Behling's podcast is I was like, "All right, I'm really terrified of Nazis. I really have to understand Nazis." So I started reading the hardcore Nazi stuff, not stuff about Nazis written by someone who's thinking critically or whatever. I'm like straight from the source. What are the Nazis saying on their websites? What are they saying in their books? What does the Jewish Peril say? What does the Turner Diary say? What do all these things say? And in that, it's not to say that it's not scary or horrifying. It's atrocious. It's worse than you think. But you start to realize that that's not really what's happening around you. That's not what's really happening in your communities. And at least the more that I understand things, the less fearful that I feel of them, the less I want to go to war with them. And that might be family dynamics, that might be politics, it could be literally anything. You need to jump into the water of the things that you're scared of doing. Like with Antifa, if you were in Antifa, you should go talk to some Proud Boys. You should go talk to some 3%ers. You should go find your local militiamen. They're easy to find. They work at your gas stations, they work at your stores, and they all have tattoos. Have a conversation with them. I did. And you know what? No one ever threatened me. They always treat me and my husband with kindness. I've never integrated with them. I'm not looking to get mixed up with militias. But as far as just talking with people in my community and being like, where are you coming from? What was your thought the last few years? A lot of these people are some good freaking people and they're not Nazis. And you owe it to yourself to go and figure that out for anybody who's listening in that position. Like,
And how do they do
yeah.
that when so we have something called digital media literacy and what people think it is versus what it is in so many cases it's not the same thing. It's telling our kids that there are only certain things that are approved that they should be listening to. If anyone
Mhm.
listens to another point of view, well, then they're in danger of becoming quote unquote far right. And that can be anything, things that are just
Yeah.
not that far out of reality. But how do we get the kids to listen when they're being told absolutely do not?
The kids want to rebel. The kids really want to rebel. They want to look to rebellion. You want to look to rebellion? Like, make it cool to have a conversation. Show these kids what it's like to go out and grow, to like actually critically think, to say, like, hey, you want to do something real, you want to do something radical, have a revolution, you ain't got to be violent about it. Like, these are the cool things that you can engage with that you will feel good about engaging with, that'll help your community. Like we have to give these kids a new form of rebellion. Their rebellion before was guns and gangsters and popping pills and Marilyn Manson. Like those are my inspirations getting into this. Now I got some new inspiration, now I got some Tom McDonald's in there. Now I got some Jordan Petersons in there. And you know what? My mental state is so much better for it. Like we got to give these kids better heroes. So like these kids want more than nothing than to look at these adults and tell them to shut up. There's adults in your life that you need to look at right now and tell them to shut up because they are acting a fool. And those kids need to see it. Like, that's not saying you need to go pick fights, but whenever you see some bullshit, you need to call it out. And you especially need to call it out in front of those kids because they need to see an adult in the room, truly.
No,
So,
I actually had somebody who said that to me. They said, us kids know there's something wrong. We know that all of this inclusion is making us more divided, more than we've ever been before. The question is when are the adults going to stand up for us? And that's a
you know,
whole nother.
don't wait for the adults. Don't wait for the adult. You're a kid right now, and everyone in your school is a little activist and they want to shut you down and they want to be loud. Educate yourself, come back with some better points, challenge them openly. If they're going to sit there and they're going to berate the white kids in the school or the kids who don't get in line or the little black kids that don't believe in CRT, if they're going to sit there and berate them publicly, we need to get back to the day and age where we stand up to bullies because that is a bully. We need to call it what it is. That is bullying behavior. And how do you treat bullying behavior? But call them out. Call them out, and you might be surprised to learn that other kids want to call them out too. And if there's one person doing it, and then there's two, and then there's three, and yeah, maybe you have to go to the principal's office, and yeah, maybe your parents get called. But honestly, if you're the kind of kid doing that, then something tells me you have the kind of parent that doesn't mind picking you up from school that day. Like, stand up for the other kids. That's a thing. Take those punches. If they're going to come at you, like, stand up for each other. That's a big thing. Kids don't stand up for each other.
Yeah. No, I think it's time that we restore the need um and fill the place of the hero. The people who will get out. And I've wondered about the girl who punched me. I've just thought, I wonder if she has regret. I wonder if they go through a phase where they're just, because it can't be empowering to treat another human being poorly. I
I know she's got to feel regret, and I know a lot of other people did too, because even though they won't admit it outwardly, I've had drinks with these people. I've done drugs with these people. They've cooked me dinner. I've been in their homes. I've played with their cats and dogs. We've played Monopoly. I know these people.
They're normal
They
people.
know they're normal people and they know damn well what they're doing is wrong. They're just too scared to admit it.
So is it groupthink? Is that how they get in? Is that what empowers them?
I think so. Strength in numbers because then you feel like you have a sense of community because a lot of these people just feel so alone and so fearful that if saying the right words and doing certain things means that you can have a group of friends, then go for it. Because like I used to consider myself to have probably like 20 or more friends when I was in the thick of it. But then push comes to shove when you really start to open your mouth, they are not your friends. It is just numbers. It is just a facade. It is just a replacement for whatever family values you had that were destroyed. Maybe you ruined your relationship with your family. Maybe your family ruined their relationship with you. You're trying to keep that hole filled rather than going and finding maybe one or two people who could give you like actual substantial meaning in your life and who can really help you grow. Like everyone just wants to be a part of a club, but that's not the way to do it anymore. The club's a trash party. Like it's not fun hanging out with the masses anymore. You get more than 5 people together, the brain cells just start to go down and down and down for the most part, at least in my generation. It's just not fun. So change it from a club to a clique. Go and lessen your friends, shrink your circle. Because a lot of these people know too, these people aren't their friends. It didn't matter how many bulls we spoke together, how many hearts to hearts we had, how many times we cried together, how many times we raged together. It's like all of a sudden meant nothing to them because it's purely about the politics. And that's just not a healthy way to live.
Well, and what's going to be the next scapegoat? When I study about communism, when I talk to people who've escaped communism, they are promised everything. They're promised, oh, your government is going to take care of you. And that really does seem like the goal. The goal is to get you guys to believe in an allegiance to Big Daddy government who will provide for you in every way.
And not even the United States government. Here in May, the World Health Organization is signing a global treaty. All of our rights
Globalism.
and autonomy is going away. They're going to dictate what happens during pandemic crisis, during gun crisis. What's to say here in a couple of years they start talking about population shrinkage and testosterone and sperm count going down. Maybe their way of acting on that is no more abortion across the planet. Liberals need to understand this. They will come in and dictate every emergency. It won't matter if you're a part of a protest group. Going to your Supreme Court and protesting will not matter anymore. Writing to your local officials will not matter anymore because the World Health Organization is an international body and they will not be held to our standards as the United States government. So
Yeah.
Hitler was a globalist too. These are fascist. I'm still opposing fascist. Even though I walked away from Antifa, I'm still opposing fascism. And other people can do the same.
Or maybe you are now opposing it because before you were
Nah,
opposing people you were taught were.
that's a fair point. Thank you for pointing that out. It's all a learning process. I've had a really weird life.
But that's wonderful because what I always say is what you are is autodidactic. You're self-taught. And the point of life is to be a continual learner. I'm really impressed with you. Like really, you are a very wise young man. What are you, 20, 23?
27.
Okay. But the fact that you have the guts, but the point is that you're putting light out in the world. And light is what gives people hope. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to share my religion. We just need to be able to look at other people as human beings and not think that if we don't agree 100%, we need to completely destroy them and leave them, leave ashes and rubble, and figure out why you believe that. Because it's very interesting to me that we watched a lot of politicians justifying the work of Antifa and saying these riots should go on and we're going to fund these people and get them out of jail. And why? Because they're using young people as pawns.
And they make the
Ty,
young people feel good when they do it.
yeah, only during the moment though. It's like a drug. And then you
Short
go
term.
home and you soothe yourself with more drugs. That's what I recognize. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I wish you the absolute best. If I can ever help you, please reach out. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye.